The romantic sight of an iron horse crossing the Grand Narrows Bridge is becoming a distant memory. Today, the 105-year-old swing bridge that used to open so boats can pass freely through the Barra Strait is permanently stuck that way. And it's been 5 years since the train tracks that cross it, running from Sydney to Port Hawkesbury, were last used. Steve Smith lives on the outskirts of Sydney next to the Cape Breton and Central Nova Scotia Railway. He's watched the infrastructure fall into disrepair, worsened by the Thanksgiving Day flood of 2016.
Large washouts, the ties are falling from the rails into the washouts. You can barely walk around or get through, and I find that it's a problem. It could be a safety concern for the public who's using the trail as a sidewalk, and it's a safety concern because of flooding. I mean, you can't have water moving through areas that are filled with blocks and railroad debris.
With no trains running, Smith says people are increasingly using the tracks for pleasure. He says that's why they need to be repaired.
It's almost a two-sided conversation for the safety of the public. First of all, they shouldn't be on the tracks, but at the same time, there's ATV trails and other walking trails and other crossing points that are very close to the tracks and go over the tracks, and the washouts definitely are a safety concern.
Trains carried coal and steel across Cape Breton Island throughout the last century, but the need for rail cars diminished rapidly with the loss of those industries. In 1993, the rail line was sold by CN Rail and has changed hands several times since then. Now it's owned by Genesee & Wyoming, an American firm that was recently acquired by another, larger Canadian company. Since 2015, the owner has discontinued using the line in Cape Breton due to a lack of business. Genesee & Wyoming had planned to abandon the line altogether, but the provincial government has paid the company a subsidy of about $400,000 a year to keep the line from being ripped up. Charlie McLean is co-chair of the local group that sprang up to try to save the line. McLean shares Smith's concerns. He says the rail line could be an economic engine with some investment.
The longer it's ignored, the more costly it will be to rejuvenate it and get it back in operation. That's not rocket science, it's just 1 and 1 equals 2.
People in Orangedale, Inverness County, still remember a better time when the rail line was a vital link.
Oh, it's deplorable. It should never have gotten to this state to begin with. Again, too, I know it'll probably take a lot of money to get it back up to a good inspection level, but it can be done.
Blue Morrison says if the tracks were restored, trains could bring cruise ship passengers from Sydney out to the country to spur a rural revival. Cape Breton Regional Municipality has been trying to attract a container terminal to Sydney Harbour, and CBRM officials say a rail line is vital for economic development.
There's going to be more than just one winner if the railroad is workable again, and that's going to be everybody.
A 2017 study done for the Port of Sydney Corporation estimated the cost of repairing the rail line and bridges at more than $100 million. The study says the Grand Narrows swing bridge would need a large chunk of that to get the line back into working condition. In February, Nova Scotia Transportation Minister Lloyd Hines announced plans to strengthen legislation, saying the government should have the, quote, regulatory authority to ensure public safety on discontinued or abandoned rail lines. Amendments to the Railways Act would also make regular inspections mandatory. The minister declined an interview for this story, but the department says the rail line has not been fully inspected since 2014. It also says enforcement of the new rules cannot begin until regulations are finalized. Andre Hood, a vice president for Genesee & Wyoming, says he's not aware of any public safety concerns on the Cape Breton line. Hood says the company has maintained the railway to the standards required by the province. Tom Ayres, CBC News, Sydney.